Today I'm going to be talking about the new Trapped collection from Gourmande Girls. It is their Halloween launch and it actually came in this beautiful PR box that I wanted to show you guys because this will be available for purchase, several different varieties, and I'll get into details about that a little later on. But of course I'll also be talking about all of the individual items coming out in this collection, so if that sounds good to you, please keep watching. And in case you're new here, my name is NOOPUR and I love indie makeup and all things color and sparkle, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. It really means a lot to me and I would really appreciate it if you could give the video a like and consider subscribing if you aren't already and if you love indie makeup. Now before we get into the close-ups, swatches, my look, my thoughts, all that good stuff, I do want to give you launch details and disclose that I did receive this collection in PR and to do some paid swatches of the palette, but the entire thing is launching on September 5th at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I'm going to list out everything that's included in the collection as well as the pricing. So there is a 14 pan palette that will retail for $55.99, 14 glosses in traditional duochrome and multichrome finishes from $18 to $22, 3 liquid lipsticks that will be $18, 2 highlighters that are $20, and multiple carefully curated PR boxes which will include the palette, 1 highlighter, 2 lippies, and the collector's box for $105. And all of this should be code eligible, so you can use my code, which is an affiliate code NOOPUR, to save on the collection, which means that it'll help you save, but I will also make a small commission from it, so thank you so much if you use it. It really does help me out. Here's the cover. It has a Venus flytrap and was designed by Doodles by the Bunny. And here's the inside. It's the standard 14 pan format from Gourmande Girls and is not magnetic. Here's the entire palette swatched out. There are 9 mattes and 5 shimmers. The mattes felt consistent with past Gourmande Girls palettes. They were creamy and pigmented both in swatches and application. The shimmers also feel like previous shimmers from the brand. In general, they are creamy but not overly emollient or oily. A couple were a bit more loose in the pan and delicate. None of the shimmers were super flaky or difficult to smooth out. Snatched is a marble pan with a silvery white center and deep red perimeter. When mixed up, it turns into a grungy charcoal with silver and red sparkles throughout. This one has a small particle size and is on the dense emollient side but not quite oily. Alive has a pretty sheer green base and sparkles that shift softly from chartreuse to green. It has a medium particle size and feels a bit dry compared to some of the other shimmers. Venus is a holochrome with a sheer pink base and sparkles that shift from a greenish teal to blue to indigo. It has a medium particle size and was a little loosely pressed in the pan. The holo is clearly visible. Bitten has a very sheer pink base and multicolored sparkles that are blue, pink, and silver. The dimensional sparkles are not super visible from a distance and it appears more silvery overall. It has a medium particle size and feels a bit on the dry side. Unhinged has a deep base and sparkles that shift from a warm, almost copper to a gold. There are also some pink sparkles mixed in for dimension. It has a medium particle size and is a little loosely pressed. This is the Trapula highlighter. It is an iridescent with pink, green, and blue sparkles. Due to the medium particle size, it has a more sparkly finish. If you build it up, it will leave a white cast. It can be used as an eyeshadow as well. These are 2 of the lip glosses. They have a bit of a thicker formula and are quite pigmented with a faint, sweet scent. Both of these have a sparkly finish. I did not feel too much grittiness from the one I tried, but I demo it later in this video with more details. For the look, I'm really being pulled to this gorgeous, bright, like magenta fuchsia type of shade up here, and I think I'm gonna build the look around this. So usually I am a build and blend girly, but this is quite a pigmented and bright saturated shade, and so I'm actually depositing it here like quite heavily, like more than I usually do in the crease, and then I'm gonna softly blend it out. Like to me that looks like, what am I doing? But we're gonna bring it to this level over here slowly. And I'm actually gonna use a clean detailed brush to do that. And something I want to mention is that this shade was particularly noteworthy to me when I was swatching the palette because it felt like extra buttery and soft compared to the other mattes. And Gourmande Girl mattes, like as a whole, usually swatch really nicely and I don't have issues with them, but for some reason this one felt super soft. I actually wiped off my original brush and I'm going back just to kind of like do some heavy lifting with the blending, I think. My eyes are a little dry, so if you're seeing that catching there, that doesn't usually happen, but I've been going through a tough personal time and I've been crying a lot and rubbing my eyes, so they're not in the best shape right now, if I'm being honest. But what I wanted to say was that this shade, because it is so soft, I did notice when I swirled my brush in the pan, there was quite a bit of kick up, which doesn't bother me, but since this is a pigmented shade, I would make sure you tap off your brush really well before applying it to avoid fallout, or do your base after your eyes. I did a bit more blending off camera just to take care of that little catch over there, and you can see like I didn't have the same problem on this side, but I know that there's a dry patch right there. But I picked up a little bit more pigment now that I'm happy with the blend, and I'm going to re-intensify it right there in the deepest part of my crease only. I don't want to carry this too high up and ruin that blend that I have going on, but I do want this color to be more intense. And I will say, for such a pigmented and like, this is deeper than a mid-tone. I wouldn't say it's a deepening up shade, but it is deeper than a mid-tone. And for this depth level, this blended out really beautifully on its own without using a lighter matte or setting powder or any of that. I accidentally moved on to the next eyeshadow without first doing my lower lash line, so ignore what's going on over here. I'm actually going to use this same pink matte and just run it on my lower lash line along the whole thing. And again, because this shade is so pigmented, I'm going to work in light layers here. First, take just a little bit like this and really feather it out. Now we can move on to deepening things up with this matte over here. So I'm doing my usual thing where I really like stamp it over here at an angle to get heavy pigment, and then softly start blending it into the lid like this. Especially when I'm using sheer shimmers in the lid, which I will be in this look, I like to make sure I soften up this blend so there's not like a harsh line underneath the shimmer when light is not hitting it. Then using the same brush without dipping into more pigment, I'm gonna softly start blending this out. Sometimes I like to do it without picking up more, just to see, like with such dark shades, if it's really going to stretch, which it is a little bit, but I'm gonna pick up just the tiniest amount more and once again stamp that in this area, and then continue to blend outwards. I'm gonna switch to the lower lash line, picked up that same deepening up shade, and I'm going to smoke it very tight to the lash line since this is quite a deep dark shade. I don't think I picked up enough, hang on. But this is quite an intense shade, so I want to be very controlled and careful with where I'm placing it and how much I'm using. Then I'm actually switching to this brush, which I used for the bright magenta shade, and I'm going to use that to further blend the edges of this, because even though this is like kind of in the same color family as magenta shade, it is so deep and dark that I don't want it to like completely overtake the magenta. Like I want to add smoke over here, but I still want it to be like pink rather than just like ambiguous smokiness. And now switching back to the first brush that I stamped on the smoky shade with, and I'm going to start blending that a little bit in this direction now that it's not so much going to overtake the pink matte. One final dip, and I'm going to stamp it over here to re-intensify things, but not really like blend it out, just like tap, tap, tap. When working with such rich, deep, dark shades, I just like to take my time, do things really slowly so things don't get out of hand. I'm gonna move to using a bit of a lighter matte next, this pastel-y purple shade over here. I'm taking it on this really tiny, pointed, almost like sparser blending brush and placing it over here. And the reason that I'm putting it last, even though I usually like to work from light to deep, is I don't really want this to overtake the look. I want it to be primarily pink, and I just want it like peeking out just a little bit here at the front, almost imperceptible, but you can still just like lightly see it there. And I'm also dragging it down into the inner swoop area almost, which is why I wanted such a pointed brush that was sparse so I didn't put on too much. Now I'm going to move on to shimmers, and I'm picking up this beautiful shade over here that reflects blue, but it has like a pinky base, so I think it's going to work really well with this matte work. This shade does feel like it's a little bit like almost looser in the pan, not like super loosely pressed, but basically make sure you're careful with it if you really want to avoid fallout. And I'm just like really pressing it into the lid to also avoid that. You could use a glitter glue too if you prefer. I switched to a brush just to get the edges in the inner area over here. This is a holographic shade, and I can still see the sparkles in this lighting. I don't know if you'll be able to, but when I do sparkle cam after I finish the look, you'll really be able to see them. I also really love how intense the non-hollow sparkle is. Like this blue is simply jumping off my lids right now. For inner corner sparkle, I could go for this green to add some contrast, like more contrast to the look, or if I want to keep the contrast just between like the lid shimmer and the pink matte, I could go for this shimmer over here that would like just kind of mesh right into the look. I think I'm gonna save the green sparkly shade for a more like green teal focused look and use this one today. Besides, I already have enough contrast going on in this look already between the shimmer on my lid and the mattes. Plus, this shimmer just flows so well into the purple matte that I have here that I dragged into the inner swoop. Like, it just melts right into it. And this shimmer also has like the prettiest multicolored sparkles. I don't think they're as visible here, but I will point them out during Sparkle Cam. But one thing I do want to note about this shimmer is that it's a bit on the drier, like slightly crumbly side compared to the lid shimmer especially, which I feel like this shade has a little bit of emollients to it, but this feels a little drier, and like it almost took like a little bit of extra effort to like stick down onto my skin, because I don't tend to get primer all the way up into this area. I have like mostly just like powder over there from like setting my concealer, and I just feel like it didn't stick like as much as a more emollient eyeshadow would. Not that it was like hard to stick down, it's just like I actually feel like usually I have to be careful with very emollient chunky eyeshadows because they will like stick so easily in one spot that it's hard to like blend them out, and this like swept on with more of like a dispersed effect almost, and I had to like build it up with 1 or 2 layers to get this level of sparkle, but I would rather do that than have it stick down uncomfortably. Now it's Sparkle Cam time, and oh my gosh, you can really see how special this holochrome is. It is just so stunning. It shifts all the way to this almost like ultraviolet, like a blue indigo, I guess, and then like a more true blue over here, and then this like tealish green straight on, along with all of that hollow just scattered throughout. And then the inner corner shade, like I said, inner swoop over here, beautiful multicolored sparkles, and it is different enough from the lid shade, but it just meshes so well with all the other colors I have going on, and I love this look so much. I did my blush and mascara, and while I wait for the mascara to dry to pick off the smudgy bits, I am going to try on one of the lip glosses for you. I actually got sent 2 of them. This is the shade Toothy and this is the shade Chaos, and I think with this look, this shade is going to look so good. So I did go ahead and line my lips with NYX's Brooklyn Thorn Suede Matte Lip Liner, just because I feel like the purpley undertones will go well with the purple base of this gloss. The gloss has like a light, sweet scent. It's not super like strong or anything, but I'll have to see what it's like once I put it on the lips. I did notice when swatching these that they felt like thicker than most glosses that I'm used to, but this one was thinner than Toothy. It's also a bit more like sheer / buildable, versus I felt like Toothy was very like opaque in the base and like just thicker in formula as well. So I do prefer the formula of this one. This is one light layer, but I'm gonna go ahead and do another one just to give it like a good go. Here are 2 coats, and it's very pretty like visually. I love the finish of this and how like purpley it is. I do think using the lip liner helped. Like, I personally don't use glosses like this without a lip liner because I just want that like definition and clean look, and I feel like it helped, but it's just like such a pretty finish, and I can definitely see the blue sparkles in here, and from a distance it's more of this like sheen, almost like frosty effect, a little bit of shimmer. I think in strong lighting it'll be more shimmery, and in like indirect lighting it'll be more of like a, it doesn't look like a frost, but it isn't as like sparkly. So I love how it looks, but I will say, I don't feel like much grittiness. I feel like just like the tiniest amount. It's not super noticeable unless I'm really like mushing my lips together. But like I said, it's not like a gloss formula that I'm used to. I do prefer more like, not super slippery, but not so like thick, I guess. Like, and it's not that it's thick, it's just that it's not as like glossy, I guess, or like as moisturizing feeling. But I do like the way it looks, so I'm torn. I also don't really notice a scent now that it's on, just want to mention that. So I already gave you my thoughts on the lip glosses, and before I give you my overall thoughts on the palette, I do want to talk about the highlighter really quickly because I did not use it in today's video. I was sent the Trapula highlighter. There's another one that I believe is a more like smooth highlighter, and this one is a bit more like a sparkly texture, and I just don't really like using highlighters like that on my cheek. I prefer like a smoother, more like sheeny type of highlighter, so that's why I did not want to use this. And I do think that this would make a good eyeshadow though. That's typically how I use highlighters like this, just like all over the lid, in the inner corner, or like on the brow bone. And I would even use this like on the nose for like a fun type of look, but I just did not want to use it today. Now let's move on to the palette, and before I even give you my thoughts on this or any of that, I want to mention that in the promo for this collection, this palette, the brand mentioned that this is actually kind of like a prequel to their other like Halloween themed palettes, Nightshade, Spooked, and Haunted. And I don't have Spooked or Haunted, but I do have Nightshade. The bottom palette is Nightshade, and on top I have Trapped, and I feel like they're like similar concepts, different fonts, if that makes sense. Like there's nothing exactly matching between the two palettes. Like I feel like maybe this like bright magenta shade is a little similar to the shade in this palette that I used today, but aside from that, I really feel like they are different enough, and also this palette has been discontinued, so you can no longer get it. I also think for my preferences between the two palettes, I much prefer Trapped because I have a video where I talked about 4 palettes from Gourmande Girls, including Nightshade, and this was the one that I liked the least out of them, not because there's anything wrong with it, but because this color story to me feels like intimidating almost. Like I have a hard time putting together looks in my head using this palette down here, but with this one and the assortment of mattes and shimmers, I can imagine way more looks, and it's just like more in line with my preferences, so I do prefer this. One other thing that I want to point out is it might look like there is a true black matte in both palettes, but I feel like the black matte in Trapped is more of like a soft black versus the true black in Nightshade. And for my preferences, like if you know me, you know that I don't really love black mattes in my palettes. I do think it makes sense for a Halloween palette, but I will take a soft matte black over a true black any day. So now moving on to Trapped on its own, and I did already mention that I do really like this color story because I think like you can get a really large range of looks using these mattes, and they kind of like flow really well together. Like you have your pastels over here, you have a couple more like mid-tones, and then like deepening up options, and I feel like, you know, the purples can be used with the pinks, the greens can be used with the yellows, the black can be used with any of them really, and like everything just like goes well together, if that makes sense. And that's my favorite kind of palette. It is a matte heavy palette, which I don't mind if the matte quality is good, which the matte quality in here was really good. I think that's really evident by the fact that I was able to blend out this like very pigmented saturated magenta matte over here without any issues, without using a lighter shade or setting powders and all of that. And even this pastel shade showed up like pretty well on me, and I sometimes struggle with pastel purples. They can turn a little like grayish on me, but this did not do that. And based on how these two swatched, they felt very similar to this, so I have high hopes for them. I also love when palettes have multiple deepening up options that are not a black. So even though we do have like a soft black matte here, we have like 3 other options to deepen up with for all of these other matte tones, which is amazing. I love to see that. And I think that this shade of green over here is so beautiful and interesting because it almost has like a little bit of blue in it, keeping it more cool tone, and it's really just such a pretty shade. I also am a personal fan of like grayed out dusty purple matte, so yeah, I love this color story. There are 5 shimmers in this palette. Like I said, it is a matte heavy palette, which I don't mind. And I actually like all 5 shimmers in this palette. I've noticed with Gourmande Girl palettes in general, they tend to be matte heavy with about 5 shimmers. And with some of their previous palettes, I haven't usually loved all 5 of them, but in this palette, I do really like all 5, and they don't tend to have like all multi-chromes or all super special shades, but I do think all of these are really lovely and sparkly in their own right, and I do enjoy all of them. The one that I like the least, though, is this marble pan over here, just because I feel like there's such contrast between the lighter middle portion versus the edge being really dark and like that reddish shade, and when you mix it together, it just turns kind of like gray and murky and dingy, and I feel like it's kind of at odds with the rest of this palette being like a very bright, colorful palette. So I feel like you need to either use just the center portion or the edge portion, or I guess you could mix it and use it with some of the purple shades, but it's just like It's a pretty shade on its own and I like it, but I have difficulty imagining it with the rest of the palette, if that makes sense. I absolutely love the two shimmers that I used today. I think they're so, so pretty. The holochrome over here is stunning, a really, really special shade and pretty unique in my collection. Like, I can't immediately recall anything quite like this, and I have a pretty large and extensive collection. And this shimmer over here, I really like it because it has that sheer base, and I love shimmers like that since they're so versatile. I can use in my inner corner as like a faux iridescent almost, but I can also use it over any of these mattes and like transform it depending on what I layer it over. So love this, and I love the multicolored sparkles in it too. It makes it quite dimensional. So those are my thoughts on the entire collection. Let me know what you think of it and whether you're going to be picking anything up. And I do want to apologize for how late I'm getting this video up. Like, it's probably like launch day when you're watching this, and I wanted to get this up earlier, but I mentioned I'm having kind of a rough week and it just made it really hard for me to film any earlier. And I did kind of get my package a little late too. The mail was just, you know, being the mail. So I do apologize for the delay, and I hope that this is still helpful if you were curious about the collection. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!